Hi guys, Jonathan here with a bit of a weird one, even for us. I'm fascinated to learn how our social media cohort did with this one, because it's pretty off the wall. Bit of a giveaway that this is not, in fact, a rifle or a carbine. Perhaps what's going up here at the front, which we'll look at in detail in a moment. This threaded nozzle at the bottom was probably a giveaway. Now, this is the ROKS-3 flame gun. We are lacking, unfortunately, the backpack, fuel tank, and nitrogen tank that was actually required, clearly, to run this thing. It's a flamethrower. So this is just the flame gun, or the projector in British terminology of the time. We do, in fact, have a complete LPO50 flamethrower that you might have seen over on the GameSpot channel when we've covered flamethrowers over there. As the designation would imply, that is a Cold War design. This and the ROKS-2 are what came before. So they are the late 30s, I think, with the two. 1940s with this. 41 onwards. The date line is a little bit blurred, at least for me, without too much access to Russian language sources. Now, I've had to cheat with the name. This is...
Ранцевый огнемет Клюева-Сергеева.
Or at least that's part of the designation ROKS-3. So Kluyev and Sergeyev, I presume, are two Russian designers. I know nothing about them. Those of you who have access to that material, by all means, join in the comments. The other part of the name, backpack flamethrower. So, well, you'll be familiar with the idea of a backpack flamethrower. It's essentially the only way to do a man-portable flamethrower realistically. The first version of this, the ROKS-2, or ROKS-2, I suppose you could call it. Similar design to this. Major change up here, or this is a change from it, I should say. Great big sort of flame cage with a clamshell protective casing, I think it is. We don't have one. I only have access to the same material that you have online. But the number of changes from the 2 to the 3. So the 2 actually had a backpack or knapsack that was, as far as I can tell, designed to look like a knapsack. It was a flat, horizontal thing on a frame with the fuel tank and the nitrogen tank below it. And then, of course, the hose connecting it to the gun. The 3, so what's missing from this, is a much more conventional cylindrical vertically arranged fuel tank with the nitrogen tank attached to the side of it. So the pressurized nitrogen is giving it the shove, essentially, down the hose, and the fuel in there is thickened gasoline, petrol, 50% ratio, with the translation from the German language manual that I found for the captured version mentions creosote or tar, or bitumen. The translation's a little unclear to me, but some kind of a thickening agent in significant proportions with gasoline, and of course it's spraying this burning liquid, so it sticks, it burns, it's pretty horrific stuff. Hollywood flamethrowers tend to be this just flame that as soon as you shut it off, it stops burning. Still not very nice, but not this horrific sticking mixture that carries on burning while it's attached to you. But all military flamethrowers use that type of burning fuel. So that initial ignition cage up at the front, which is somehow ignited by I presume, one and then the other, 2 blank cartridges, it's not clear to me how, is replaced by quite an ingenious arrangement that I'll show you now with the what I'm going to call the ROKS-3 from here on out. Right, so we've just cut there because I realised something as I was about to show you the business end of this flame gun, which was that this housing up here, that's currently on the bottom because I fixed it, was incorrectly installed upside down, so that this feature here was on top. And that made no sense to me because I had figured out how this thing works. It's not rocket science, but nonetheless. And it made zero sense that this thing, which is essentially a flame director, I suppose you might call it, for a blank cartridge, made zero sense on top because you can't fire the top cartridge. What the heck's he talking about? Well, this device up here is, see me rotating it. This is a revolver cylinder. It's knurled on the outside for a grasp because it is, contrary to the 1965 US Army manual, manually operated. It doesn't automatically rotate when you pull the trigger. So for each ignition cartridge, so each time you want to fire this thing, you have to rotate a live cartridge, a live blank cartridge, into position, ready to fire. You can load them in here, where the little recoil shield is not. So cartridge in there, rotate, next cartridge, rotate. Get it all loaded up with 10 cartridges. We believe those are blank 7.62 Tokarev pistol cartridges. That's a little unclear. So that's your ignition system all loaded up. There are little ball detents inside here between the guide director shroud thing that I was talking about and the actual cylinder, which just allow it to click into place. So there's a plate pierced with holes into which the little ball detents pop, and they have springs behind them. So that's it, popping between two different chambers on the cylinder. So the missing part of that story is that there's this housing underneath. So this is the flame gun tube for the fuel to be pressurized through. The tube below is a housing for a firing pin that's about, well, more than a foot long, and it runs from the trigger all the way through here, and your firing pin would pop out into the primer on the back of each blank cartridge. So by putting this the right way round, we now have a situation where the firing pin fires the primer, the cartridge ignites, the blank charge blast is directed, angled into this muzzle cage here, which is receiving a jet of fuel. And that's how you get your burning stream of fuel. And the timing on that is dictated by the trigger mechanism in here. Now this is not in great condition, including a split stock. So even though one of the screws is already out, I have not dared to take it apart, and it does not really function anyway. But there is a loose diagram online that gives you a rough idea of how it works, and that is pulling back on the trigger pulls, with a sort of counteracting mechanism, pulls a valve backwards that opens up the fuel path. So a spring-loaded valve is pulled to the rear, and then that's also preloading a striker. And so at the end of travel of this long double-action type trigger, sort of, your valve is fully open, so the fuel is jetting out the front, and your firing pin plunger has been pulled back and is let go, strikes the back of that rod, strikes the back of the cartridge, fires the blank, and ignites the jet of fuel. I hope that makes sense. So we are also missing, as well as the hose and the tank, we're missing the safety plunger, which would have sat in there. If you have a look online, you can see that in situ. Speaking of looking online, and we can show you the picture of this device here that was installed upside down, the way I was able to make sure I wasn't dreaming this, and that it wouldn't, well, firstly, it didn't make any sense mechanically, and secondly, we found a picture of a soldier with one of these things, and it's installed the right way up. So that was the final confirmation. So we can show you that image as well. But yes, the plunger, and all that does is disengage the firing rod for the cartridges. So pulling that trigger will always produce a jet of high pressure fuel, which isn't great if you happen to be in front of it, but it won't ignite it unless the safety plunger is in the correct position, which I believe is the forward position, but without it fitted, it's a little bit hard to check. And perhaps the most interesting thing about this, I haven't even mentioned yet, which is it is shaped like a gun. And that's really the main reason we're showing it to you. It could be mistaken for a rifle, or well, a carbine. It's too short to be a rifle. And the sharp-eyed amongst you might have noticed that less so the fore end, but it does have a full wooden fore end, which a flame projector wouldn't normally. But certainly this buttstock is very Mosin rifle, including these slot sling loops, this thing was carried on a sling. The butt plate is literally a Mosin butt plate off the same production line. The buttstock, if I can compare with a real Mosin, as it were. So here we are with a genuine Mosin rifle with sling installed. Move that out of the way. And although the forend is a completely different piece of wood, there's no way this very slender forend is at all the same component, but it's reminiscent of a carbine. The buttstock, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this is from the same production, but two things mitigate against that. One, the width of the slot here on the rifle is too wide, the space for the tang, essentially, or for the action in the case of the rifle. So these are not repurposed Mosin buttstocks. Conceivably, they could be from stock blanks that are then finished by some of the same people, probably. One for the flamethrower production, one, other string for the main rifle production. Even then, I think that's unlikely. I don't think you'd waste the wood of turning up a whole. Admittedly, this is a two-piece stock on the Mosin, but it's one piece around the action. So you wouldn't make this piece of wood and then cut it in half to repurpose it for flamethrowers. So my assumption is they're making the buttstock separately to the rough design of the Mosin rifle with Mosin butt plates. And why are they doing that? Well, the main reason, and it's written basically everywhere these flamethrowers are written about, which isn't many places, and it's to disguise the flamethrower, because flamethrower users in the First World War were targeted just like snipers and machine gun crews were. So to give them a weapon that at first glance looks like a carbine and a flame tank that looks like a backpack, and I believe there was even a canvas cover on the ROKS-2, it's a way to limit their vulnerability on the battlefield. I don't think it's just that, though. I do think there's some training value in having a gun that works like a rifle. The trigger's in roughly the same place, the wrist, the buttstock, you shoulder it. Intuitively, you're going to be able to teach people how to use this, even if it's under the arm, firing from the hip effectively. So that's a minor factor playing in, I assume, but we believe it's mainly about protecting the flamethrower guys. Not to say that they're going to go up like Roman candles if they get struck. That, as far as I know, is something of a myth. It takes a particular fuel-air mixture and probably incendiary ammunition to actually make that happen. But nonetheless, especially if you're standing up on the battlefield and people think you're about to unleash a jet of burning fuel in your direction, they're going to target you. Having said that, the maximum effective range of this is 35 meters, which isn't very far at all. So if they're that close, you possibly can tell that they haven't got a conventional weapon. So it's all a little bit vague, but we believe that's the reason for it, and why the pattern room, Ministry of Defence pattern room, collected, and we have received from that collection this example of a Soviet-era flame gun. We'd love to get hold of a flame tank at some point, and a hose, and the missing safety, and even the missing screw, and to give this thing a bit of conservation, because it's not in the best state. But we're still glad that we have it, and it sits nicely with our LPO 50, which is a complete flamethrower. The only complete flamethrower that we have, I should say. We don't even have complete British flamethrowers, which is a bit of disappointment to me, as you can probably imagine. As always, thank you very much for watching this episode of What Is This Weapon? We are a charitable organisation here at the museum, as I'm sure you know, so we very much appreciate any donations that you might like to send our way. Link in the description as to how to do that. Otherwise, of course, we're very happy that you watch us here on YouTube. You can also check out the GameSpot channel, where we make regular appearances as well, and our various social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You're welcome to check out all of those as well. In any case, we'll see you again next time.